Thank you, Samra. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I wanted to thank Khurshid especially for organizing this event with all my esteemed colleagues, Hussein, Amar, Shariq Saab, Zishan Saab, and the others as well. This is one of the topics that's, in the last couple of years has actually taken quite an interest in a lot of people because, unfortunately so, because a lot of people either have suffered personally from a form of digital or cyber fraud, or definitely know of someone who has suffered from this as well. So I would like to basically just start off with my presentation. Um, I hope everyone can see. Anayat, if you can confirm that the screen is being shared and I'm in presentation mode. Is it working okay, Anayat, please? Or anyone?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Thank you, Anayat. Excellent. So the topic that I was given today, and Khurshid and I had some back and forth on this, was to try and make it more meaningful, not just for the participants, but for Pakistan as well. Now, fraud in itself, as Khurshid has mentioned in her opening speech as well, has continuously evolved, and there's always emerging trends. I remember when I started the field of fraud investigations, the way we conducted fraud was completely different. Even the courses that we studied in university were very limited around what fraud on how to investigate fraud. But now they have masters in fraud investigations that you can, and white collar fraud that you can actually undertake. So the field has evolved, but of course, the world is continuously evolving as well. So that means we have to continuously evolve as well. I just wanted to start off with, just some snippets of what's happening in the news. And a lot of these news headlines are something that you guys have either heard or have similarly seen or read these kind of news around. Every other week, at least in the UAE where I'm based, there is some headline or some training that the UAE government is providing to its citizens and enforcing upon banks and other organizations to educate and train their employees as well around online and cyber fraud. But with the emergence of ChatGPT and AI, fraud continuously and in the last couple of years has evolved enormously. It's just become a completely new ballpark, and that's what we're going to be talking about in the emerging trends. But the way of conducting fraud is always interesting because fraudsters are always looking to find new and innovative ways to defraud you, which means we have to come up with new and innovative tools, techniques, and measurements to basically combat and detect and prevent fraud and investigate it, which means the regulators also have to be kept abreast and keep evolving with the times. So fraud by its very nature is very hard to detect. And it's because the fraudsters have to find new ways to defraud. So AI, the use of deepfake, as Khurshid mentioned, and mimicking of voices and videos, and just the more emergence of everything being done online with e-commerce and online banking and online commerce, it just makes it a very, very dangerous time and for us to be vigilant. So what I wanted to do was basically just take a step back and talk about the introduction to how all these technologies are working. So the digital landscape has changed in the last year. I remember when we first got a computer, it was a completely different computer to the ones that we have. My phone is, I think, 10 times faster than the first computer I even owned and has way more memory and capacity as well, which means a lot of information is right now held and stored on my own personal device, which allows any fraudster that can hack into my phone to have at least every aspect of my life opened up to them. The advancements in technology and artificial intelligence have become the biggest threats, but they're also the biggest tools that allow us to fight fraud as well. Because of the size and enormity of data, investigating fraud 10 years ago versus what's happening right now, and we'll talk about some statistics that I'll show later, is very different. Previously, we could go through accounting records very quickly, go through email records very quickly, but now with the size of gigabytes and exabytes and petabytes of data, in order to detect and investigate fraud, it just becomes very challenging, which means we have to continuously evolve our investigative processes, identify patterns and tools to investigate and find anomalies in data and identify unusual activity. But technology on its own, and this is one of the quotes that I really liked and wanted to share with you, that technology on its own is merely a conversation piece. True innovation is only realized when the right professionals put it to good use. Simply put, advancements in technology both create an opportunity and a threat. In the right hands, it can help people, make people's life easier. But in the wrong hands, it can open up Pandora's box. So before we move on to the emerging trends of fraud, what I wanted to do was take a step back and talk about investigation and forensic investigation, because if you understand how investigations and forensic investigations are carried out, then you can understand what the impact towards all these trends on investigation is. So from an investigation point of view, it's simply the act or process of investigating, a careful search or examination to discover facts. At the end of the day, an investigation is to discover facts. It is up to the legal proceedings to determine who was at fault and what the penalties are and the regulators. And what is forensics? It is also known as criminalistics and is a science to criminal and civil laws. It is governed by legal standards of admissible evidence and criminal procedures. And it's a broad field utilizing numerous practices such as digital forensics that we're talking about today and forensic accounting investigations. What is a forensic investigation? Building on an investigation, a forensic investigation typically involves gathering and collecting data. And 10 years ago, that data was small. Now it's petabytes, terabytes, and exabytes of data. Using that data and applying a scientific method to evaluate, interrogate that data, looking historically and retrospectively, and making a determination of what happened. Forensic accounting builds on that, and it's basically to identify damages caused by these actions in order to find quantifiable evidence that can be used in criminal proceedings. So, what are the objectives? It's to gather enough evidence through forensic tools to prove or disprove an allegation, suspicion, or another issue. And the goals are to determine whether a crime has been committed, legally obtain information or evidence so it can be used in a court of law, identify persons involved, and a fourth objective, which is now becoming more and more popular, is enforcement. Why is this becoming more popular? Because previously, when you determined a crime had been committed, you used chain of custody and other legally methods of obtaining evidence. The end result was you identified that a crime had been committed, people were responsible, but there was nothing that can be done. So a lot of companies were then figuring out what to do, whether it was any worth of having an investigation being done, throwing good money after bad if there was no recoverability. With enforcement action by regulators and companies, it now allows companies to go after criminals and try to recover money as well. And that's through asset tracing and other methods, which is a completely different topic, but is important because one of the goals of forensic investigation is, yes, we have identified what went wrong and who was responsible, but whether or not we can recover money is a very important objective to all the shareholders as well. So now that we've talked about what an investigation is, that will allow us to basically understand how the landscape of fraud investigations is evolving. I put together some statistics that I think will be really interesting. Some of you guys may have already know about these statistics, but it just shows how much technology is becoming a part of our life and how vulnerable every one of us is. Number of smart devices that analyze and collect data should hit 50 billion by 2030. Internet penetration is around 63%. Computing and processing capacity hits double figures every 18 months. I think this number will go down from the months point of view. I think every 12 months, and then every 6 months, the computing and processing capacity will keep on increasing. The world will produce 463 exabytes of data by 2025. In order for you to understand what an exabyte is, just imagine it's 1 million gigabytes. By 2030, 500 billion devices will be connected to the internet, and 5 billion people are currently using the internet. We all use Google, and about 8.5 billion times a day are queries that are sent to Google, which is all the data that they're accumulating. And the global web hosting market has doubled from 2017 to 2018, from 32 billion to 61 billion. The most interesting statistic out of all of this is by 2040, experts believe that 95% of purchases will all be online. A lot of us are already doing that with even grocery shopping. Everything is happening online. So 95% of that will be done completely online. AI will replace about 85 million jobs, and artificial general intelligence technology, experts predict that 9 out of 10 companies will start using it. And it goes back to the earlier point that I made. because of the ease of these technological tools, a lot of companies are incorporating that into their businesses, but that also opens them up to fraud. Why is this important? Because in the last few years, we've come across a COVID pandemic crisis. We've gone through a financial crisis earlier on, and every decade or so, there is a crisis that impacts globally. And we're currently facing one right now in our country as well. Now, why is that important? Because of these trends, for example, like inflation costs, these drive consumers to find cheaper products, which means they go online to find cheaper alternatives, the most cheapest product or service, and they end up in unfamiliar marketplaces, which are kind of like the hub playing field for fraudsters. Geopolitical uncertainty, like the war in Ukraine, drives the need for robust compliance measures, but allows for fraudsters to circumvent measures for payments from sanctioned countries. There's a reliance on buy now, pay later. Credit is very important, which allows fraudsters to naturally gravitate towards these kind of schemes that entice customers in a buy now, pay later scheme. ChatGPT and OpenAI, I think, unless you've been living under a rock, everyone has either used or has basically benefited from it in the last year or so. However, as we will discuss, it creates a whole new level playing field for fraudsters. And in the recent times, Web3 and Metaverse bring in new threats, because majority of metaverses are decentralized, unregulated, and require minimal checks. Perfect area for fraudsters to go in and complete their missions, so to speak. Crypto winter is something that is a term that's being bandied about a lot these days, and that's on the back of the FTX crypto exchange, as well as the collapse of the FTX crypto exchange and the volatility in the crypto market. So people expect there to be a crypto winter in 2023, which is going to be quite lucrative for fraudsters going forward. And we'll be talking about cryptocurrencies as well. Building on artificial intelligence. Steve mentioned this in our opening remarks, deepfake. It's a term that everybody has learned, has seen videos, and it's quite interesting to watch on your phones, but when they're being used to defraud you, they become quite real, they become quite challenging, and they become quite risky in the sense of how to go about and avoiding it. They're a form of artificial intelligence used by scammers to create legitimate audios or even videos. But normally deepfakes are associated with videos, which is why point 3 is about voice cloning, where they're using sound bites from different people to create deepfake voice messages. And according to McAfee, it only takes about 3 seconds of an audio bite to put together a very convincing AI voice clone. Khurshid then also mentioned about phishing, and we'll be talking about phishing in more detail later on. But this is not something that's new. Phishing has been done through letters, it's been done through the Spanish mail, it's been done through emails. But what's interesting now is because of the advent of ChatGPT and other tools, and if you recall in one of the news that I mentioned how FraudGPT and other similar programs have been created, it makes it easier for fraudsters to create more legitimate and convincing fraudulent schemes. Gone are the days of where you could just look at an email and look for misspellings, look for clumsy grammar, and you'd be easily able to identify that it is a fake email. Now with ChatGPT, that's also been revolutionized. Verification fraud. Now, a lot of banks and a lot of organizations are trying to make it easier for their customers to be verified and create accounts. And that creates an opportunity for fraudsters to gain access to your personal information, as well as create fake accounts for you to basically sign up, and they can steal this. So these are a lot of scams that are happening globally, and every other week or so there's something in the news, at least in the UAE, where someone or an organization has suffered from this as well. Moving on from AI, I wanted to talk about blockchain specifically because in order to talk about crypto, you have to talk about blockchain technology. And I'm just going to skim through what blockchain technology is, but it was a revolutionary technological advancement that was supposed to make transferring of assets and recording payments more secure and more easier. And it works, as the name suggests, in pieces of blocks that build a chain that can be easily verified. And if anybody tries to put in an unauthorized ledger or transaction within it, it would be discarded. It would not be considered, as well as it would be very hard to track into once the transactions are reported, to try and hack into it as well. They are permanent transactions and make it much easier for people to conduct business or transact. Why it matters? Because it builds on trust and resilience. It's a very trustworthy mechanism because a block of transactions must be validated. It can't be undone or reversed. It's resistant to disruption because each of the nodes operate independently. But if one node goes offline, the blockchain still functions. And they're used primarily for cryptocurrency and tokens, non-fungible tokens, as people know them as NFTs, and also for smart contracts, which includes the automation of transferring money at regular intervals. But what are the risks of blockchain technology? Biggest risk right now, in light of GDPR, personal data privacy protections, and CCPA, that Hossein is going to be talking about as well, is there is no ownership, because each blockchain data is equally owned at each place where it's distributed. But for personal data regulation, it requires one owner who is accountable. That's not available in blockchain technology. And blockchain records are permanent. If data changes needed to be made, they cannot be made. So once you've shared your personal data, it cannot be removed. Moving on to cryptocurrencies. Not all blockchain solutions involve cryptocurrency, but that's primarily where blockchain technology comes into play. And the risk to blockchain is the volatility from the cryptocurrencies valuations, the universality of cryptocurrencies, because not every cryptocurrency is accepted, and there's limited markets for its trading. Security, it's really easy for hackers to, because of its anonymity, it becomes a bigger threat and target for hackers and malware and ransomware. And a lot of you must have read how Elon Musk lost the password to his Bitcoin hard drive as well. So they're not easy to insure. So he lost billions of dollars, and that's the same thing. You cannot insure your crypto assets at the moment. So if they're lost to a hack or a lost password, you've lost all that money. And lastly, especially from an investigation point of view, really hard to track, because the substantiation and tracing. For our businesses, our primary motto is always follow the money. Cryptocurrency makes it really hard to follow the money. Now, and to sum up, blockchain technology provides transaction security, but not account and wallet security. And this is really important, because a lot of people forget that. They just feel that because of the systems that are in place for blockchain transactions reporting, it is a secure mechanism, which it is, but it still leaves your account and wallet susceptible to fraud. And the distributed database and the cryptographically sealed ledger payments, corruption of data. Any value stored in the account is still susceptible for account takeover and hack. So, moving on to crypto scams from blockchain technology. About 46,000 people have lost around $1 billion to various crypto scams from January 21 to June 2020. In just 18 months, $1 billion were lost. And that is only from information that was shared with the Federal Trade Commission. So that number will definitely be higher. Why is that? Because consumers tend to know very little about how digital currency works and how to protect their assets. One of the most common scams to watch out for are blackmail and extortion. Blackmail and extortion scams, business opportunity scams or investment scams, get rich schemes, fake job listing scams where people basically list jobs and invite you to participate, giveaway scams. There was a most famous Elon Musk Freedom giveaway on Twitter that took place, and a lot of people were defrauded out of that. That was also part of impersonation scams, and then phishing scams, the pump and dump schemes, flash loan schemes. We'll talk about in ransom and malware as well. But pump and dump schemes are how a lot of regulators are now trying to monitor the advent of crypto trading in their jurisdictions. Similar to how the stock market operates in pump and dump schemes, a lot of fraudsters tend to hype up a cryptocurrency to get the price up and then dump it, leaving a lot of people with holding just paperless assets. Flash loan scams are quite common. A lot of crypto traders require funding to buy high and sell low, but they're using it mostly for arbitrage from one trading market to another. They're seeing that there is an arbitrage opportunity in one market, so they try and buy the cryptocurrency from that market. And they use flash loans because they're very short, by the name, they're very short term period loans whereby they buy the asset and they sell it, which allows fraudsters to create the market for flash loans, allowing people that are looking to trade to try and get those flash loans, but end up losing their money and their assets as well. And romance and dating scams that have been going on since the advent of phones, etc., is the same thing for crypto. Instead of asking for money, or in Pakistan, that used to happen, I think in the early 2000s, where people were used to ask for reload of internet cards and hours. Now it's moved on to cryptocurrencies. Social engineering schemes, typical who, as we said, the method and the mechanism remains the same, but the assets and the motives can vary. One of the biggest things that people and organizations need to train their employees is that hackers don't need your passwords. No matter how strong your security system, no matter how strong your password, there will always be the vulnerability of human error. They will always try to exploit individuals. They exploit the human loophole to get around cybersecurity roadblocks. And instead of hacking your accounts to steal your identity, they are targeting to hack you. And this will become more clear when we talk about the types of social engineering scams that are happening. But typically, how a social engineering attack normally works is discovery and investigation, similar to how criminals used to target people's houses to go into and break into. Same thing with cyber fraudsters. They identify organizations, they identify individuals, and try and do their homework on which ones are the most vulnerable, which ones are the most relaxed, laissez-faire about their security. Once they've identified their targets, they look for potential entry points. And those are the different mechanisms on targeting from different malware. But they always try and use their knowledge of you to identify the hook that will get you interested in the scheme that they need to run. Once they've done that, we'll be talking about all the different tools that they use to conduct their social engineering fraud or cyber fraud. And once it's done, they vanish without a trace, without leaving much evidence. The interesting thing here is that the average time to detect a cyber attack or data breach is close to 200 days. And if you recall, Khurshid mentioned this in our opening remarks, that it is really hard to detect. And by the time you normally detect, the damage has been done. But it's close to 200 days on average before a cyber attack is even detected. That's a big number. Tiny cybersecurity mistakes cost companies a huge sums of money. The average cost of a company data breach is about $4 million. Now, all these terms have been bandied about and discussed, and I'm sure will be discussed later on throughout this webinar as well. But I just thought it would be really helpful to talk about the types of social engineering schemes. So phishing attacks, they are aimed at creating a sense of urgency, curiosity, or even fear in their victims. But spear phishing varies from phishing. It is a phishing attack, but as the name suggests, unlike phishing attacks, which are general in nature, spear phishing is targeted towards individuals and entities, as I was mentioning earlier. And a different, more specific types of phishing is like smishing from SMS and phishing from voice. Baiting is using false promises to bait a victim's greed or curiosity. That's the hook that they're looking for. Piggybacking and tailgating. The easiest example to say that is, for example, if you live in a secure compound or a apartment building, there's security locks or buzzers that you need to enter before accessing buildings. A lot of our companies are secured in that sense as well. But normally, fraudsters may dress up as delivery guys or IKEA guys, and they can enter the building. Same thing on accessing secure locations and IT infrastructures. Piggybacking and tailgating is trying to use an authorized person to get access to restricted data. Pretexting is gathering important personal data from a series of questions, and that can be in the form of even voice. They can send you SMS, or sometimes they can call you to say, we're calling from your bank and we've identified an unusual transaction. And they basically want you to, before they can proceed to tell you what that transaction is, they want you to verify your account details. Business email compromise is the same thing, where people's emails are compromised from an organization, and companies have lost over 2.4 billion in 2021, according to the FBI. Scareware is being bombarded with false alarms and fictitious threats. It's the threat. It's the threat, the fear that gets people to say, "Oh, something's wrong with my email. Something's wrong with my phone," to basically get you to click on a link. And watering hole attacks are, once again, fraudsters are becoming so smart and are becoming more and more patient that once they do their homework, they try and identify websites that people go to visit to, or that you go to visit to, and either create fake websites similar to that, or hack those websites so they can gather personal information. Nearly 60% of companies have been targeted from phishing attacks, and that's the biggest threat that organizations say is impacting their businesses in 2022 and 2023. This is an old case study, but it was quite interesting because of the global reach of this heist. In 2015, hackers completed a $1 billion heist across 40 countries with just spear phishing attack. And it was so simplistic in nature, where they sent an email to bank employees asking them to deploy this software, which was supposed to help them become more compliant with the organization's IT levels. And once clicked, they had access to the workstations and were able to infect ATMs and get away with $1 billion. Since then, it's become much more evolved, but the simplicity of this attack and the volume of that they were able to get away with and were never caught was quite alarming, and I wanted to share with you guys. So, signs that you may be a victim of malware or a cyber attack, and they're quite simple. And if your computer is working really slow, it's freezing up or crashing. Your storage space used to be 10 gigabytes, now it's down to 7, 5, something like that, and you haven't downloaded anything. Your homepage randomly changes, or homepage isn't there anymore. Browser keeps getting redirected. All of these things are just simple. Don't necessarily mean that you're a victim of cyber crime, but are signs that there may be something wrong and may be indicative of one. I won't go into the details of the techniques and the tools that we use to detect malware, because they're quite complex in nature. But what I wanted to close with is how to prevent and counter cyber crimes. And for example, for deepfake videos, even though the quality of deepfake videos is getting better, they still cannot replace the originality of someone's demeanor, their features, etc. So always check the quality of the video that you received, the shadows, if they're appearing in the right places, facial hair, etc. Is it there where it should be, or is it gone when the person's speaking in the next minute? Check the backgrounds, because the deepfake is imposed onto different backgrounds, so sometimes it's not easily imposed onto the background. But always be vigilant and observant. Ask the right questions. So if you get a call from your bank, always, whenever I get a call from my bank or anyone, I always ask them to shut the phone down, and I will call back their customer number, because I'm not going to verify my details to someone over the phone, because that's what they asked me to do as well. And if they are reached out to me for something important, it must be in my records. So once I call their customer care number, it should be on the records and I can talk to someone. Same thing with links. Any link that I receive from in my email, I never open. I always go to the website and sign into my accounts from there. So these are just kind of like simple practices that you should inculcate in yourself and tell others as well. Always call back. Don't respond to questions on the phone. A lot of companies are now creating not just so a lot of companies had started putting labels to whenever an employee was emailing someone outside of the organization. But similarly, what they started doing is when someone receives an email from someone outside the organization, it has a label above on the header that says that that email has been received from external parties. Why is that important? Because a lot of times people get emails from their bosses, they don't check the email addresses, and it seems legitimate, the tone seems legitimate, and they respond. And that even happened in our organization to one of our colleagues who was in investigations and fraud, because they were so busy and stressed out with work that they didn't manage to check, and they just responded really quickly. So it's becoming really easy to set up those headers so that immediately that you know, for example, that even if it looks like it's an email from within your organization, with that header, it shows that it's not. So you're immediately aware. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize is that we all have spyware and antivirus softwares on our computers, but now McAfee and all the other, leading antivirus companies have built some spyware and antivirus softwares for your phones as well. So please install those on your computers. Restricting access of USBs and third-party websites is one of the it's difficult to do in an organization, but I think very important, unless and until you have immediate requirement from your work. I think it's one of the good securities. But last but not the least, and the most important one, educate and train people. Educate and train people. You cannot put a price on the most important tool is learning about what the new trends are and training and educating your employees. In conclusion, technology is evolving. It is our biggest tool, it's the biggest asset, but also our biggest threat as well. We need to stay abreast of all the technology advancements, especially from our side, from a forensic accounting point of view, when we have to interrogate such large volumes of data. Artificial intelligence tools and data mining tools are really critical, but those are the same tools that hackers and fraudsters now use to comb through all your personal data information to run these kind of schemes. Fraud detection and investigation analytics is just the beginning of innovation, and we just need to be more mindful of how to work with our regulators and companies to coming up with and learning about these new tools to manage and detect fraud. Thank you so much.